Late afternoon in the small town of Greenfield, Ohio, the sun was dipping low, casting golden rays across the road leading to Everfresh, a supermarket that supplied the local residents with fresh produce and daily necessities. The large, beige building with a green roof stood beside a spacious parking lot, constantly bustling with the sound of shopping carts, footsteps, and sometimes the chit-chat of neighbors greeting one another. Greenfield was a warm community. People often stopped to chat whenever they met. The town was home to a diverse population of European, African, and Latin American descent, forming a rich cultural tapestry, though underlying prejudices sometimes still lingered beneath the surface. Malik Carter, a 28-year-old African-American man with a tall, athletic build, chocolate-brown skin. He graduated from a local community college and now works as an intern engineer at an auto parts manufacturing company. Malik is polite, typically dressed in a simple hoodie, jeans, and sneakers. Harriet Monroe, around 70 years old, with white hair pinned neatly under a pale pink scarf. She lives alone on the outskirts of town. Has a somewhat conservative nature, and can come across as unfriendly. She usually wears a worn gray cardigan and large-framed glasses. Mia Stewart, a 17-year-old part-time employee at Everfresh's produce section. Mia is quick on her feet and always wears a bright smile, though she can be a bit shy. She ties her light brown hair into a neat ponytail and often wears a store cap as part of her uniform. Vernon Cook, a 60-year-old white man, a veteran of the Gulf War, now working part-time as the store's security guard. He's upright, a bit stern, but kind-hearted beneath his tough exterior. April Thompson, a young mother in her early 30s with 2 elementary school-aged children. She's shopping for dinner ingredients with her kids. That afternoon, everyone was busy with their usual routines. Not anticipating a moment that would abruptly halt the supermarket's bustle and leave a deep impression on them all. Malik drove his old sedan to Everfresh after work. He needed to pick up some fresh greens and yogurt for dinner. Stepping out of his car, he took a deep breath, smiling at the last rays of sun. The warmth on his arms brought a sense of calm after a stressful day. Entering the store, Malik gave a quick nod to Vernon. The security guard, as usual. Vernon smiled and nodded back. "You're running late today, Carter." "Yes, I just finished some overtime and came straight over." Inside the supermarket. Bright fluorescent lights shone evenly across the aisles. Shelves were neatly arranged. Small groups of customers shopped and chatted in a range of voices. Some stood in the produce aisle, inspecting fresh vegetables. Others hovered near the bakery, enticed by the fragrant smell of freshly baked bread. Occasionally, young children scurried around giggling, prompting their mothers to call out warnings. Malik savored the lively rhythm of the small town. It wasn't too rushed but still lively enough to liven up everyday life. At the produce section, Mrs. Harriet was carefully selecting apples. Her weathered hands, speckled with age spots, pressed each apple with a slight frown on her face. She often grumbled about quality or price, sometimes complaining loudly to Mia. "Weren't these apples cheaper the other day? How come they're more expensive now?" Harriet muttered, loud enough for Mia to hear. "They might have raised prices because of reduced supply." "Ma'am." "I'm sorry," Mia explained politely, trying to keep a friendly smile. Meanwhile, Malik was pushing his cart over, scrolling through his phone for a grocery list. He looked up. Scanning for the oranges. He stopped near Harriet and Mia. He reached for a bag of bright, plump oranges. Suddenly, Harriet spun around, her sharp eyes glinting behind her glasses. She'd been eyeing him from the moment he appeared. She glared as if he was something foreign to this place. In a shrill voice, she blurted, "People like you don't belong here." That statement was like a spark in a tranquil room. Mia froze, lips pursed, unsure what to do. Malik paused, turning toward Harriet, his brow creasing in confusion. Rather than stop, Harriet raised her voice further. Why don't you go back to Africa, where you people came from? There are plenty of unemployed Americans here already. Suddenly, the supermarket's background noise seemed to fade away. A few onlookers, including April and her 2 kids, stood still. The children blinked in bewilderment as April gently pulled them back, worried about what they might hear. Malik's heart pounded. Never in his life had he expected such an overt racial slur, especially in the very town he'd lived in for years. Conflicted, he felt the urge to either walk away silently or speak up and set things straight. A flood of emotions surged through him. Anger, rage at being unfairly targeted. Embarrassment, he was surrounded by many onlookers. Helplessness, would it help to fight back or cause a scene? He recalled his father's advice, take a deep breath and count to 3 before reacting to insults. His grip on the cart tightened as he tried to stay calm. Briefly glancing at a frightened Mia and at Vernon, who had noticed something and was on his way, Malik decided not to let his anger explode. He took a long breath, steadying his voice, and spoke. Do you realize what you just said, and how much meaning it carries? Harriet, however, stood undaunted. She retorted. I know exactly what I mean. This is my country. People like you don't have a place here. The tension was palpable. A hush fell over the aisle. Some bystanders frowned in disapproval. But no one had yet dared to intervene. Malik felt anger welling inside, but he restrained it, pondering how to respond in a way that avoided an ugly shouting match. Meeting Harriet's steely gaze. Malik set his shopping basket down and stepped forward slightly, still keeping a respectful distance. He spoke in a firm yet calm tone. So, you want me to go back to Africa? But let me tell you how my family got here. His quiet, measured voice instantly grabbed people's attention. Without raising his volume, he continued. My great-great-grandfather was taken from a distant land in Africa, put on a ship like cargo. Sold into slavery. My ancestors shed sweat and blood building part of this country. My great-grandfather, Joseph, was born in Georgia, worked as a sharecropper his entire life. Never owning the land he tilled. He dreamed that one day his descendants would no longer be enslaved and could stand tall. My grandfather fought in World War II. He returned home with medals but wasn't allowed to sit next to white folks or drink from the same water fountains. Still, he never left the country he had risked his life to protect. Malik paused, inhaling to steady himself. Harriet looked rattled, though her expression still held a touch of disdain. More and more shoppers stopped, riveted by Malik's story. My parents, he went on, are ordinary working people who taught me to respect others, no matter who they are. My dad would stop on the road to help you if your car broke down. And my mom was a teacher who taught children from all backgrounds. Yet here you stand, telling me to go back to Africa, a place from which my ancestors were once kidnapped and barred from returning. His words hung in the hush that followed. Harriet's face turned red, but she still stood unbowed. Malik concluded quietly. I belong in this country just as much as you, maybe even more. My family has paid a very heavy price to live and contribute here. Like a silent wave, the entire store seemed to hold its breath. April, the young mother, held her children's hands and whispered. He's right. We can't stay silent. The kids, though too young to fully grasp the situation, sensed the tension. Mia stood by the produce stand, eyes misty from shock. Then, a voice spoke out. That man is right. It was Vernon, the security guard. He stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Malik's shoulder. Meeting Harriet's gaze, he said. I served in the military so that every citizen could live and work freely in this country. No one has the right to tell others to leave just because of their skin color. Others in the aisle seemed to awaken. Some nodded in agreement. Mrs. Madison, an elderly shopper, spoke in a quavering voice. My husband fought in Korea, and he always said, we stand under one flag, the same for all. Harriet glanced around as though searching for support. But no one sided with her. The steadfast arrogance she showed initially now wavered. Her lips trembled, her eyes uncertain with a mix of anger, confusion, and perhaps a flicker of remorse. Yet, she still didn't apologize, only muttered. I didn't mean to. Malik exhaled, weighed down by sadness. Harriet was older, and he didn't want to humiliate her further. Quietly, he spoke. You may not have meant it, but your words still hurt people. I hope we can learn from this. Suddenly, a man dressed in a dark suit and tie appeared from behind the frozen goods aisle. It was Mr. Henderson, the supermarket manager, who had been checking inventory. He stepped up. What's going on here? He asked, sounding both concerned and firm. Mia quickly explained the situation. Mr. Henderson frowned and turned to Harriet. Ma'am, Everfresh welcomes all customers. I ask that you remain calm and respectful. If you continue making hateful remarks, we'll have to ask you to leave. The crowd grew even more astonished. Banning a customer was rare, but blatant racism in public was beyond tolerable. Harriet was visibly flustered, not sure how to respond. Suddenly, a trembling voice cut through. Grandma, you forgot what you promised Mom again. All eyes turned to see a young woman of about 25, with a gentle face, lightly holding Harriet's hand. This was Jessie Monroe, Harriet's granddaughter. Jessie had also come to the supermarket, only to stumble upon the scene. Remember, Grandma? Mom, Harriet's daughter, always told us to be grateful for everyone who helped build this country. She despised any form of prejudice. A pale look washed over Harriet's face as she removed her glasses. Perhaps, in that moment, she was recalling her late daughter's wish for her to change her ways. Ever since her daughter passed away, Harriet had grown more withdrawn and inflexible. Jessie continued speaking gently, seeming to beg Harriet to rethink her words. Onlookers watched. Sensing Harriet's prejudice might stem from complex, deep-seated reasons. The store remained silent as everyone watched Harriet. Some expected her to storm off in a rage, others braced for another outburst. Unexpectedly, Harriet's hands trembled, and she slowly took off her glasses. Turning to Malik. Her voice had lost its sharp edge. A glimmer of regret showed. I feel like my life is tumbling downhill lately. I lost my pension, and my daughter is gone. I'm afraid of losing what little I have left. But I shouldn't have lashed out at you. She glanced at Jessie, as though trying to hide her tears. I'm sorry. I promised your mother I'd try, but unable to continue. She wiped her tears. Many were taken aback to see her break down, having first appeared so proud and confrontational. Malik stood there, feeling part of the weight lifted from his chest. He took a step forward, speaking gently. I understand. Sometimes, when we're afraid, we lash out at the wrong people. I hope you know we do need each other, to build a stronger community. I still respect you, because you've endured hardship and loss. His words resonated, calming the air around them. Then, April began to clap softly. Her 2 children followed. A few others joined, turning into a modest yet genuine round of applause. Mia gazed at Malik with gratitude, tears still in her eyes. Mr. Henderson nodded. That's the behavior of a truly decent human being. Harriet slumped her shoulders, as though releasing a burden, giving Malik a faint nod. She and Jessie wheeled their cart toward the registers, saying nothing more, but everyone knew she was lost in thought. Though the immediate tension had been resolved, news of the supermarket incident spread throughout Greenfield. Word got around about Malik's composed, brave stance, and how he spoke a profound truth. Vernon recounted the story to a group of veterans while having coffee at a local cafe. They were both shocked and impressed by Malik's calm under pressure. Some even sought Malik out later, shaking his hand to show support. Malik, for his part, never sought attention. He kept working daily, occasionally stopping by the store or going to the gym, then returning home. But more than once, strangers would approach him to express thanks for speaking against prejudice. As for Harriet, Jessie revealed that the elderly woman now seemed more introspective. No one believed she had entirely changed overnight, but Jessie noticed her grandmother reading about equality movements or asking about Jessie's diverse circle of friends. Harriet would fall silent whenever anyone mentioned Everfresh, sometimes sighing, a likely reminder of Malik's words and her late daughter's memory. One morning, Malik headed to Everfresh earlier than usual to pick up fresh bread. He spotted Mia busily arranging vegetables on a shelf. She lit up when she noticed him. "Morning. You're here early today." "Yeah, trying to avoid the crowds," he replied with a small smile. Mia hesitated, then said, "What you said the other day. I really admire it. I'm not sure I'd have the courage to stand up like you did." Malik returned her bag of produce with a kind smile. "Sometimes, keeping your cool is the only choice. If I'd lost my temper, we would have gained nothing but more hatred." Mia nodded. From afar, Mr. Henderson observed them with approval, recalling how the event had brought a new awareness to the community. Although the "Go Back to Africa" incident had calmed, prejudice never fully disappears. A few weeks later, a small group of radical youths posted anti-immigration flyers around town, using offensive language and demanding stricter measures. The news unsettled Greenfield, confirming that intolerance still lurked in some corners. Malik felt uneasy hearing this. But he recalled his father's words, "You don't chase away darkness by cursing it, you light a torch where you stand." He decided to keep attending community forums, listening and sharing. Many others, Vernon, Mrs. Madison, Mia, and more, gathered signatures for the United Greenfield initiative. Meanwhile, Harriet stayed home, but Jessie reported that her grandmother had quietly asked about the campaign. It gave Jessie a spark of hope that Harriet was gradually opening her heart. On a chilly Sunday afternoon, Malik decided to go jogging at the park near his home to clear his head. He stopped by a wooden bench under a row of maple trees, their leaves a vibrant red. To his surprise, he spotted a familiar figure, Harriet, sitting alone in a warm coat, looking out over the still lake. He hesitated, then approached her slowly. He didn't want to make her uncomfortable, but he also remembered the pain and regret she had shown. "Hello, Mrs. Harriet," he said softly. Harriet startled, turning toward him with a hint of guilt in her eyes. She recognized him as the young man she had once insulted. She took a breath, then quietly nodded. They sat in silence for a while, only the sound of rustling leaves keeping them company. Finally, Harriet sighed. "That day, at the store, I behaved terribly." Malik waited patiently. Harriet swallowed, her voice low. "I've lost so much and am afraid of losing more. I shouldn't have taken it out on you." Malik rested his hands on the bench's edge, offering a slight nod. "I don't hold it against you. We all have fears. I only hope you see we can be neighbors and friends, we share the same space." Harriet gave a sad smile, eyes drifting to the horizon. "Thank you. I'll try to change. Slowly. Sometimes no more words are needed." They sat together a while longer, watching the sun set over the lake, a gentle symbol of peace and hope. Life carried on. Everfresh was still bustling. Harriet could occasionally be seen buying apples, Mia continued her part-time job, Vernon kept guard at the entrance, and Malik stopped by for his usual groceries. Yet deep down, all had learned a meaningful lesson. The incident of Harriet shouting, "Go back to Africa," became a marker in Greenfield's collective memory. It sparked many to share their own experiences, discussing their family histories, hardships, and the ways they'd also faced prejudice. At a community meeting in the town hall, Malik stood up for a short speech. "I used to think remaining silent or walking away was best when insulted. But I've learned that sometimes we must step forward and speak the truth, not to create more conflict but to let facts be heard and healing to begin. Each of us, regardless of skin color, culture, or language, just wants to live peacefully and happily. If we hide in fear, prejudice will never go away." His words drew enthusiastic applause. After all, people wanted Greenfield, and America, to be a place without barriers. Somewhere in that crowd, Harriet sat with Jesse. She listened intently, eyes thoughtful, not standing to speak. After the meeting, she quietly gestured for Jesse to help her home. But she paused to glance over at Malik, giving a small nod of acknowledgement.